Welcome again to another ORSAM class and ORSAM program. We do regularly run such programs actually for students and those who are keen to actually study on Middle Eastern issues. So as ORSAM, it's a kind of one of the leading think tanks in Turkey. We do run specific analysis for the region, for the entire region actually, as North Africa and the Middle East, and MENA actually region in the first place. Then we also run actually specific reports for those, for the society, for the scholars, and for the policymakers as well actually. But on the other hand, we do like to organize such events to reach youngsters actually, or to reach students who would like to develop their skills on Middle Eastern studies. So let me introduce myself. This is Recep Yorulmaz. I am the Director of Economic Studies at ORSAM, and also I do work as Assistant Professor at Ankara Yıldırım Beyazıt University in the Political Science Department. As an economist, we actually perform specific analysis, especially on political economy for the MENA region. The whole MENA region actually, it includes many issues like the current issues, and also the issues like the problem of the entire region, like the rentierism, etc. And also we do actually analyze the issues related with the MENA region and Turkey, and the mutual relations and mutual policies are also our key topic to analyze. Today, most of the time, actually, we have many lectures that you can see our online classes as on social media or YouTube platforms. You can just watch them through and also use them as another extra sources to develop your skills in this topic. Today, actually, I was planning to make the entire current topics to mention for you to analyze them all. But since we have restricted time, I'll try to brief lectures summarize the current issues, political economy issues actually, in the MENA region. So those are, there are some specific titles on this. As far as I know, you already given the introduction of Middle Eastern economies class by Murat Aslan last week. And so since you get to see the introduction as the main specifications of MENA region, countries in the MENA region, like rentierism issue, like which means actually natural resource abundancy, and also other issues like their specific and fundamental problems like youth unemployment, and also the economic decomposition of the lack of economic decomposition of those countries actually, which are count as the fundamental issues of Middle Eastern economies itself. As we will see today, the current issues actually also related to those fundamental issues, because those issues just cause many reasons, many cases, and those are the cause of many cases. Also, they are related to each other. There are positive correlation between them. So also there are causality between them. Those deficiencies actually cause many other problems in the region, as we will see. So today's class, today's lecture, I will mention mostly about the US sanctions on Iran and Syrian and Lebanon economic crisis, since they are purely related to each other. And also I will mention normalization process in the Gulf, as well as other countries like Egypt, which actually started with Egypt, by the way. Then if we have time, I will try to mention about the current embargo issues of Turkish goods, Turkish products by Saudi Arabia and some Northern African countries, actually. But if we have time, if we can be able to find time for this, I think we will find, as far as I measured so far, calculated so far. But the current issues, actually, since the issues in the topics in the Middle East, Eastern countries actually changes daily. Just we faced a similar thing this morning, actually. We have heard that the king, the father king of Saudi Arabia, actually Salman, the King Salman of Saudi Arabia, called President Erdogan to start negotiations with the Saudi Arabia and Turkey, actually. So it was a bit surprise for us, but again, it was not the mafiatic son of Saudi Arabia. It was a father king, actually. So we should actually understand the difference between them. So the father king actually called President Erdogan, and they actually agreed on establishing a mutual team to solve the problems, at least negotiate the problems between two parts. So it was a bit surprise, but not surprise for us, because as our analysis showed, actually, you can read through our webpage, as our analysis showed that actually with the change of US presidency, with the Biden's policy, it was expected a bit, because it's a bit unclear that how will US policies will be shaped on Saudi Arabia, because Trump's perspective was more like a merchant guy, actually. He was seeking to get more benefits, like a merchant, actually, more benefit from mutual relations with other countries. So he did not care about the cold murders by crimes by any administration, any regime. He was just actually focusing on to get more benefit, I mean, in terms of the profit part. So we'll discuss all these issues, but we will see that all these issues are also related to each other. So as US sanctions on Iran is not new, actually, because the second, or we will call this, actually, we will differentiate these sanctions as Obama's sanctions and Trump's sanctions. Because Obama's sanctions was on the date of, it started 2013, 2012 actually-ish, and 2015, it ended 2015, and formally actually 2016. Then 2018, with the Trump administration, he just declared that he will be out of the, the US will be out of the nuclear deal, and he won't recognize them, and he won't recognize it anymore unless the Iran regime actually agreed his terms. We'll discuss this, but why it is so important. Also, it is related to why it is related to other issues, other relevant issues in the global world. First of all, with the Trump administration, we do face the aggressive foreign policies and as well as aggressive economic policies of the US, which affected the world economy, the entire world economy, actually. What kind of effect is that? What kind of examples we've seen so far? They started with declaring a kind of economic war, which called war to China, which called the trade wars, actually, between the US and China. And at the end, we've seen that as a public finance guy, I can say that actually I did say on that time, also I wrote about it. For example, the increase of tariffs against any country by the US actually also affected the domestic market, and the investors and the stakeholders in the market. So as it be, it affected the internal market, the domestic market, and people at the end actually kind of started to take their support from Trump's administration at all. But all the rationale behind these wars actually it was not about just Trump, because Trump is a smart guy and he's like a merchant, and he's not an oligarch as well. Actually, he's a business guy. He's a merchant and he knows the business well. So he and his team actually just noticed that the war and the competition between China and other Western bloc is kind of losing against China, because China has many advantages like intervening the market easily by or through its governance structure. Okay, China believes or adapts liberal economic policies in somehow, but at the end, this country is a kind of socialist country. So there is just one party ruling there, and it's ruling by it's been ruled by autocracy. So with the mixed usage of autocracy and liberal economic policies actually make China more advantageous than other Western countries where they follow capital economists or neoliberal economic policies, where the government intervention is restricted. So as I do give public classes, public economics classes, and we do discuss the market failures, which is the reason of which is the cause of government intervention into the market. Since the market failures are not rare, actually it's common right now, but in liberal economic policy, under the liberal economic policies, the intervention into the market is not that easy comparatively to China, in comparison of China actually. But in China, they can easily intervene into market, and they can easily, especially play with the price mechanism. But under the rules of the liberal economic policies, playing with actually price mechanism in the market actually eventually leads you, as we are taught, leads you the market failures as well as the government failures at the end. So the liberal belief defends that government intervention should be limited. But on the other hand, in reality, in practice, you cannot even compete with China, who can easily intervene into market, who can easily play with the price mechanism itself. So they reduce the cost of production, they reduce the cost of even international trade, even sending goods abroad, and they made it gave them many advantages. So the Trump guy noticed the situation and kind of declared a war against this system. So this is also called as the fall of the liberal economic policies, actually, or neoliberal economic system itself. Of course, it will be a bit difficult to change the structure of this global economic system, but at least they have to fix some deficiencies to combat against such cases like China. So Trump administration started with dealing with these issues, and actually somehow he did manage to get benefit from many of those implications, policy implications. But at the end, he also harmed its domestic market itself because of the high tariff rates. When he imposed tariffs against foreign products which come from China and other countries, actually, it also increased the domestic prices of that goods, actually, since that goods are a bit more costly to produce in the domestic market, which is actually the rule of international trade as well. So comparative advantages theory, actually. So under this theory, if a good actually is produced more cheaper in another country, you should just kind of import them to your country. If you just tend to produce or start to produce these goods in your economy, its cost actually will be much higher than importing them from other countries. So it caused, in the short run, of course, he also knew this, and he was saying actually we will manage this in the long run. But again, reaching the low cost of Chinese production actually was kind of and is and will be really difficult for any country, not just for US. So under these circumstances, actually, Trump's attacks actually against many other countries had occurred, and also we have witnessed such attacks like one of the biggest one on Iran, and it's still ongoing actually. And also he did the same thing for Turkey as well. With the 2 years ago, we witnessed this same attack on Turkish economy. He also declared this actually. He said, "I attacked in just one tweet. I attacked." I mean, Trump saying this. He attacked Turkish economy, which is the currency issue actually, which was the fragile point of the Turkish economy. Turkish economy has fundamental deficiencies, and one of the fundamental deficiencies of Turkish economy is its currency, because of energy dependency and because of the deficit of its current account balance, which actually are caused by energy dependency in the first place, and also the dollarization issue because of the increase of demand of the dollars, because of also energy dependency, and also because of the domestic demand on the dollar, and also all foreign currencies actually, and the kind of manipulations and kind of perceptions, the wrong perceptions actually, just caused this demand, increase in demand. It's another topic to argue, but Trump knew these fragilities, and he just attacked directly the Turkish economy as well. And he achieved somehow. And during that time, Turkish economy faced many problems, like starting with the increase in currency rates and decrease in the value of Turkish liras. And also during that time, the prices also especially imported goods prices increased a lot. And the inflation rate also affected by this, and inflation rate increased. But on that time, as I argued that actually that's increase was a bit political because of the attack of Trump. And also he also declared this actually. He confessed his attack on Turkish economy. Anyway, so why I put this tweet in the first place actually, in Trump administration process, actually, he started to rule the country, which is one of the most powerful country in the world, we can say, in economic manner and in power manner in terms of its military power. It's the powerful country of the world, actually, and this powerful country of the world started to rule in social media. So it was another interesting point. And in this tweet, actually, he started his sanctions on Iran, and he said that it's like, if you read it, actually, it's like a child game, like elementary school level child. If you play with Iran, I don't play with you. It's like that. But it's just against all we said. It's we always, since this first day of this tweet, actually, we've been saying that this is against international law, both against international law and also international trade rules. But this process also showed us, if you are strong, it doesn't matter of your action. Your actions does not matter, actually. You can easily run any implications, like you can easily ask one country to out of the game, actually. Ask one country to out of the market. And we will see this situation, more examples during the other slides, actually, during the sanctions on Iran. I'm not a follower of Iran. I'm not following law of Iran. But as the Turkish Republic, also as the presidency of Turkey, declared this loudly on the meetings in the UN, United Nations, these kind of sanctions actually against international law, against international trade rules actually. That's why if you are kept silent under this kind of circumstances, and you will be okay to get similar sanctions on your side actually. So you have to, as a independent country, you have to against such actions for anybody. It doesn't matter which country is targeting. Anyway, so it's all started with this tweet, but the history of the sanctions actually back to Obama, and even 30 years before this Obama administration, there was sanctions on Iran because of the same situation. And the impact of those sanctions on Iran economy a bit high. But as in this section of the class, actually, we will kind of compare the impacts of such sanctions on Iranian economy, and we will compare them as Obama's and Trump's sanctions on Iran economy. So in the first page, in the Obama's part of sanctions, actually, the impact of these sanctions on Iran economy was as follows, actually, as you can see from this infographic. Its effects on economy as the GDP growth decreased by 30% in 3 or 4 years, actually, of the sanctions. And also oil export just crippled by $65 billion, actually. So the loss of oil export by Iran for Iranian economy was $65 billion. So also automotive industry, which is kind of also an important part of the Iranian economy, which is the 12th biggest industry in the world, also decreased 38%, just crippled 38%. Can you imagine? Many people also working in this sector. And we will see other sections by Trump and the effects of, and we'll have the chance to compare compare the effects of both sanctions. And also inflation rate increased 45%, and the currency rate, actually, the depreciation of currency just reached 59% actually in Iran economy. And also unemployment rate was really high, especially the youth unemployment rate was reached up to 24%, which is important actually. You should keep in mind that the youth unemployment, especially in the MENA region, I will call this MENA, Middle East and North Africa. And in the MENA region, the youth unemployment is pretty important. Just keep in mind, and I will remind you later on different cases from different countries. Also, another issue, the frozen assets issue. Iran's foreign assets, actually, where they hold these assets in foreign countries, just hold it just because of the request from the US administration. Can you imagine? It was the time of Obama, and $80 billion of assets just frozen of Iran. Assets of Iran is frozen. So the Obama sanctions just ended in 2015, but formally, so in 2015 they declared that they will be negotiated, they will be on the table. But even this news actually just affected the market, affected the situation, and Iran's, as we have seen, as we have witnessed, the economic indicators of Iran start to be normalized. In 2016, they signed the deal, but after the Trump administration, Trump actually kind of against the deal because of some specific issues that issues are in the first place, since Iran is really good at diplomacy, and they had to manage to convince Obama administration to keep out of some specific topics of Iran in the region. What are those specific topics? First of all, the expansionist policies, imperialist policies of Iran in the region, especially in the Middle East region, like especially on the Iraq issue, on the Syria issue. And also, Iran somehow managed, as I said, Iran somehow managed to keep those things out of the table, and they get the deal with Obama administration. But Trump said that since you are fighting me in Syria and you are also against me in Iraq as well, because after the 2003 administration of the Iraq, which actually established by ethnic under ethnic and sectarian regimes, which is kind of the major reason of this ongoing struggles in Iraqi economy. If you are against me on those countries in the region, I will put those issues, your expansionist policies, into the table, and I will request you, and force you to sign the New Deal, as Trump administration said. But Iran, of course, just denied this. And also, after this denial, Trump just declared two-phase sanctions on Iran with the tweet I show you. So the first phase of sanctions started August 7, 2018, and the second phase of sanctions imposed on November 5 on same year. So now you will have chance to compare the impacts of Obama and Trump administration. After this class, actually, I will send you these lecture notes, so you can be able to have the chance to read them through again. So then you will understand the situation. So you can easily compare the situation by taking all in your hands, actually, by looking the both infographics and both effects of these sanctions. But beforehand, it is important to understand the new sanctions of Trump administration, because as he mentioned in his tweet, the new sanctions are more clear and more wise than the previous sanctions that during the Obama administration time, because this time they studied their lesson well, and they chose specific sectors to directly hit the target, actually, on Iranian economy. So, for example, during the during the Obama administration time, Iranian airplane or plane fleet, we can just say airplane fleet, was old, and they were trying to renew this airplane fleet. After the New Deal with Obama, actually, they had some agreements with huge companies like Boeing, Airbus, and other ATR planes, and so they get chance to renew their airplane fleet, and they made their agreements. But of course, in order to get this much, for example, 110 Boeing planes, 100 Airbus planes, so in order to get them in hand, it takes time. But after just 2 years of the negotiation, the Trump administration imposed new sanctions, and new sanctions started with prohibition of this kind of deals with Iran, because it says if you make trade with Iran, you cannot make any trade with US. It's kind of a huge threat, because US market is huge. It's kind of a one continent, actually. For example, just think about you are the CEO of Toyota, or you are the CEO of Honda. And as we know, in the society, American society in the US, most use Honda and Toyota cars. And also as Boeing or as Airbus, how can you just dare to not to trade with US? Actually, they are using, in the first place, they are using this power, their market power, because they are huge. They have a huge country, and they have a huge population, and they have also a strong economy and strong military power. All those indicators together make the US a strongest country in the world. It's the fact, unfortunately. So we need to understand this and play our cards according to this reality. So they kind of, with the new sanctions, phase one actually, the first sanctions of the Trump administration hit the target actually, and Iran couldn't renew its airplane fleet, and they are still using old planes, and they are really dangerous actually. So if you if you just remember the plane crashes lately in over like Malaysia and other issues, its situation is controversial by the way, but they have to renew the fleet in the first place actually. So it was about approximately $40 billion of agreement actually with those companies of Iran. So they kind of lost these agreements and they couldn't renew the airplane fleet of them. And also carpet export carpet market, which Iran hand-woven carpet industry controls 30% of the global market. And Trump administration kind of prohibited to buy Iranian carpets. So it was worth $424 million. But more important than this, there are 2 million Iranians actually working on this sector. Can you imagine the effect? Can you imagine the impact of this sanction, this prohibition? So now 2 million people became somehow unemployed, and those people will be against the regime at the end actually, because economy is everything. If you take the economy from people, if you hit a country on the economic card, with the economic card, as they did the same situation in Turkey, for example, the Gezi movement, the process of Gezi movement was about similar actually. Not like, of course, Iran, but they somehow hit the target. There were another domestic issues, but anyway, it was a bit close. So those 2 million people actually now unemployed after this prohibition. So they were against the regime. So there were already an opposition in the Iranian domestic political issue under the domestic political issue. So those people were added up to those oppositions actually. And another issue, for example, it's an important issue to show you the wrong side of this, how these sanctions actually against international law and international trade rules, pistachio market, which is it seems not important, but the pistachio market worth $852 million, and the important part here, the US and Iran are the main competitors in pistachio market. The production of 85% of the annual world market. Actually, they hold 85% of the world global market just together. And you can just, with just one move, you can just directly take, or you can just directly expel your competitor, your only competitor from the market that you hold, that you both hold 85% of that market. Can you imagine? Now, US just holding this market by itself. Can you imagine how it is unfair? And also, gold export, using of gold, 64.5 tons of gold prohibited, because before the during the Obama sanctions, Iran found a way to run around or turn around these sanctions using gold trade. They were using gold rather than dollars, which was prohibited during that time. And also in automobile industry also, which is Iran has the 12th biggest car market in 2017, for example, and had 18% growth in sales. French company PCA, which is maker of Peugeot, directly stopped its operation in Iran, And also PCA was controlling 34% of Iranian automobile industry. And those are the first phase effects of Trump sanctions. So also Iranian real hit a record, many records actually against dollar. For example, April 10, Iran's central bank set single foreign exchange rate as 42,000 reals as $1 actually. So it means actually just one exchange rate policy, strict exchange rate policy preferences for the country, but it caused many things as going to the black market. So the interest rate, I mean the exchange rate in the market changes from party to party, changes from person to person actually. Different agents start to give different prices of the exchange rate, which was the very scariest point of currency issues actually. And also during September 24, real hit another record as 160,000 against dollar. And once we get May, the currency loss reached up to 150% actually. And during that time, Iranian regime actually set some kind of packages, some precaution packages for this process. Like they started with dealing with the corruption, which was one of the main issues in Iran economy, and still one of the main issues in such economies in Middle East, many economies of the Middle East, like Lebanon and Egypt, for example. So police detained 120 people for corruption, including the former vice governor of central bank, who was charged of forex actually. So the name was Ahmet Arakci. And also the central bank government was dismissed, and the new guy, Abdul Nasser Hemati, was replaced his position during that time. Of course, even during the first phase of the sanctions, which the oil market still is not included, into the sanctions, the oil export crippled, even despite there was no restrictions from oil market actually. So it decreased 810,000 barrels per day. And French companies, South Korean and Japan companies stopped kind of importing Iranian oil and left the oil market. And in July, oil import by European Union also dropped by 40% from 460,000 barrels per day. So we need to, it's important to note here that the EU actually was against this kind of sanctions because of its obligations and because of its necessities to Iranian oil and gas. Since they are mostly dependent on Russian gas, and Russian gas mostly, they are trying to find ways to alternatives of these sources, like they are actually following the same policy in Eastern Mediterranean. So, but their power was not enough to prevent US to do such policies actually. So they had to at least decrease the trade volumes with Iran. But we need also to mention, it's better to mention that here that they also found some ways, some also different ways to trade with Iran. But Iran has been made his trade or sending its oil from illegal ways to Southern Asia. So that's why actually they are still standing. And also they found somehow a way to make trade with the EU. They were they were discussing a new scheme of payment scheme of like blockchain or another issue, using instead of dollar or gold to trade with Iran. Sanctions also hit automotive sector as 70,000 people working in the sector. The PCA group just left the country. and the production in this sector actually dropped by 38% again, as it was in the Obama's period, the Obama sanctions. So another important fact here, China, it was a kind of advantage for China. China began to fill the gap after French firms left, and they started to dominate. The automobile sector in Iran. Actually, the new brands actually just came into the market, Iranian domestic market, like Cypass, Cherry, and Brilliance models became top sellers, for example. So it was advantage for the China industry, China's market actually. So the inflation rate increased by 150%, and the exchange rate depreciation was about even more than 150%. So we came up to the second phases after the first phases actually, since Iran insisted on not to accept the terms of Trump administration. The second phases contains prohibition of export of Iranian oil, bringing restrictions, new restrictions on financial institutions, especially energy sector, working with the Central Bank of Iran. So they directly put sanctions on the Central Bank of Iran. So you directly put sanctions on one country's central bank. It's kind of a really serious issue actually. So bringing restrictions on Iranian port operators, maritime transport, and shipbuilding sectors. And also it was containing bringing restrictions on insurance and financial messaging services. What kind of financial messaging services is that? SWIFT is in the first place, as we will explain. Before we come to SWIFT, we need to show the effects of even the first phase actually, that the second phase. Before sanctions came on the oil sector, it already actually started to decrease. The oil exports started to decrease in the first place. So, for example, I gave India's example here. India, one of the main, after China, one of the main targets of Iran oil. So, export target of Iran oil. So, you can easily see the drop after the sanctions actually. So, even India actually kind of decreased, almost stopped its import from Iran actually. But then again, they found ways to buy Iran oil actually in illegal ways. We do witness actually many tankers without any flag actually just going through the Persian Gulf. Anyway, so also lately OFAC took Persian bank into the blacklist. These banks, it was important because it was being used to take international aid and humanitarian trade to Iran, even medicine import, etc. In order to overcome problems of international financial transfer obligation, Iran was kind of trust Russia and Yandex Bank, Russia and China in the first place, but somehow they couldn't support Iran itself because of against the US interventions, actually US threats. So China asked oil companies to cut out of trade with Iran, to stop trade with Iran. And China also asked its CNPC and Sinopec not to buy Iranian oil. And finally, Bank of Kunlun of China declared they won't accept payments from Iran. So they kind of abandoned Iran. They seem to abandon Iran against US sanctions. So during the time, Mike Pompeo actually declared that 20 countries cut oil import from Iran, and Iran's daily export decreased 1 million per barrel. And also another guy, the Treasury Secretary of the United States, Steven Mnuchin, explained that the sanctions on 50 banks and their counterparts, more than 200 people, and Tehran's national airlines just imposed, and those are affected directly the Iranian economy. The Iran Atomic Energy Authority, they also imposed sanctions on Iran Atomic Energy Authority and its 23 affiliates, and also those affiliated with this institution. there are many other industries and countries just impose sanctions because they are doing business with Iran. Now we are came to the SWIFT issue. The SWIFT actually is a tool, a financial messaging tool to send money abroad. If you send money abroad, if you ever send money abroad, you should know you have to use SWIFT system, which is kind of an example of monopoly. In the first place, we should understand this. We should understand this situation. So it is Belgium-based international company. So it's called International Money Transfer System. In order to send money abroad, another country, you have to get SWIFT code. If you don't have a SWIFT code, you cannot make any international payment. Can you imagine this monopoly? Anyway, after Mark Pompeo's treatments, actually, SWIFT just cut some Iranian banks' access to the messaging service. The reason was for the stability and integrity of the global system. So it was another unfair situation, actually, in terms of international trade, of course. The EU was against, as I said, of these sanctions from the beginning, but they do not have enough power to say something. So the question arises, why do these sanctions work? Why US that much powerful? I already explained somehow, but I will give you real examples to support my hypothesis, my thesis. First of all, as I said, it has a huge market. You see the United States here, small picture. It's kind of a continental, actually, huge continental. It's 20 times bigger than Turkish geography. Anyway, so it has huge market, it has huge population, and it comes with power, so market power. As an international company, after the 1980s, with the globalization, reality of globalization, the world global market actually consists of international, multinational, international companies. So as an international company, you have to trade with any country. So you do not want to lose a market like the US. So they kind of use this power in the first place. In second place, secondly, their power comes from its economy, and its money is important. The dollar is reserve money, so you need dollars in order to make any transactions, any payments internationally. So it's kind of another issue, and also its military power also brings this power. Let's turn back to real examples, actually. Just because of the failure of obeying the US sanctions against Cuba or Iran, they just impose sanctions on some countries, actually. They just punish them. For example, PayPal, $7.7 million, they have to fine $7.7 million to just not to obey the rules of the US against the sanctions that they imposed on Cuba or Iran. This time it was Iran, actually. They kind of did not obey the sanctions on Iran. So, for example, another bigger one, the ING, the bank, almost $20 million just fine to not just to obey the sanctions on Cuba and Iran in 2012. Can you imagine? This power actually comes from this. These companies, if they would like to trade, they would like to make trade in the US, they have to pay these fines. So they already paid for this. So can you imagine the power of the market right now? In Turkey, for example, we're right now discussing with the situation of the tax payment of international institutions, like international companies like Twitter, YouTube, for example, and other parts. For example, if I noticed PayPal as well, and also other internet companies, actually, because they did not have any office in Turkey, and they do not pay any tax, even though they get many, even though they earn more money from Turkey, from Turkish market. Actually, they do not pay any taxes. So government forced them to pay taxes, otherwise they will just stop their business in Turkey. But before these companies, actually, many people in the country just started to attack the government. Why you're doing this? It was a strange point for Turkish economy. It's kind of an embarrassing point. It's kind of a shame, because you do see what the U.S. Administration, the U.S. government do actually to follow its sanctions. It is unfair sanctions against any country like Cuba and Iran. It doesn't matter. It might be Turkey, it might be Tunisia, it might be Malaysia. It doesn't matter which country is it. The only matter is it's unfair. But as a Middle Eastern country, or MENA country, our society needs to be educated. It's another important hint for you. So while you are against something, you have to understand the rationale behind it. You have to understand the rationale, and you have to understand the history behind it. You have to understand the reality behind it. That's the topic. Anyway, just turn back the issue of Syria and Lebanon economic crisis. I do take them together. Why? Because those crises and those countries' economies are bound with each other somehow. Especially after the Syrian civil war, their economies just became bound with each other much. I'll explain how. But let's start with the crisis in Syria. As you do all know about the Syrian crisis, the Syrian civil war, which is ongoing since 10 years, since almost 10 years actually now, 7 million people were displaced and millions of people murdered in cold blood. It's almost 4 million people of refugees actually, 4 million of refugees start to live in Turkey, just flee to Turkey. They are living peace actually in Turkey. Of course, in Turkey right now in domestic policy, we do have many arguments here, but we do also analyze as ORSAM. We have specific analyses on them and also specific projects for those segments that show their importance and their contribution to the economy and contribution to the society as well. So, of course, there are many oppositions and controversial topics and discussions on this topic, but we still manage to live in Turkey. They still manage to live together in peace. And 11 million people, 11 million people just became in need of help after this civil war. So also half of the population became unemployed, even in Syria. The belief of, or the hope of the Assad regime was somehow, if they can be able to fire and expel those much people, 7 million people, out of the country, they could have living more wealth in their places where they live. But it was not the case. The economy just not the science of economy just shows us many examples of this. A civil war and such foreign forces in your country and a civil war at the end in your country cannot bring you good economic perspectives, good economic outcomes. So it was the case, and even in the Assad regimes, under the Assad regimes, the area under the Assad regimes started to struggle with economic crisis. According to the World Food Program, and also 80% of the people actually start to live under poverty line. We have to mention this also. And according to the World Food Program, the food prices increased by more than 200% actually, which means actually huge inflation, also huge inflation. The inflation rate more than 50% is called hyperinflation. So 4 times stronger hyperinflation just occurred in Syria. So the crisis in the opposition regions also spilled over in the region. As I said, there has also been a shortage of stable food like flour, sugar, rice, medicine, etc. Even the places that are under the Assad regime, control of Assad regime. So because actually there are foreign forces in the country and country divided into many pieces, like Russia took one sources of oil, YPG, the US based, the supported US supported by BG to control of the northern part of the oil fields. So country had left nothing, even for the Assad regime actually. So it's kind of, they are not independent at all, it seems that. So the depression of Syrian pound also was a hit record, like 50% loss in a month actually. And daily loss was almost 10%. And hyperinflation was another case in Syrian economy. The conflict started between the family members actually. The Assad regime and his cousin Rami Maglov. This guy actually, the guy of one of the strongest business guy actually, the strongest merchant in the country, and he had owned the telecom issue, I think, in many other sectors actually. He was leader of many other sectors. So once the country's economy actually went to crisis, went into struggles, and the first thing of the Assad regime actually turned its face to the economy and first face to business sector. So in business sector, there are just one cartel. As a cartel actually, this guy don't even pay any taxes. It's the same case actually. For its same case applies for any countries, even US. If you just remind this process of US elections, Biden accused Trump to not to pay any taxes, not to pay zero taxes, and they kind of proved this actually. So even Trump actually paid zero taxes. This is the key point of being rich as a business guy, as a merchant actually. So because it's kind of a long topic to discuss in economic manner, because it's kind of asymmetric information issue. We call this asymmetric information because the big companies, multinational companies actually has power to hire experts, even tax experts that develop a country's tax system itself. So they took this guy, they hired this guy into their company, and they somehow found ways to not to pay taxes. Anyway, so tax avoidance, we call this in public finance, is tax avoidance. Anyway, so Assad's cousin Rami Maglov actually was on the target, and it says of their property, and they banned him from tenders for 5 years. And also the impact of Lebanon crisis also was one of the main crisis triggering factors of the crisis in Syria. We will explain the situation in Lebanon, but we can say 70% of devaluation affects Syrian financial system. I will explain why and in what ways. And also dollar usage restrictions in banking sector crisis triggered the crisis in Syrian economy. We will also explain this. And also Caesar Act. Caesar Act again came from Trump. They can find many names for any sanctions actually. And also they use many times for CAATSE, CAATSE. The CAATSE law actually was used to impose sanctions many countries in the world, even including Turkey. Caesar Act was against the Syrian regime and the counterparts of Syrian regime. Directly they said actually Russia and Iran and the other companies and people who work with the Assad regime was under the Caesar Act's sanctions obligations. So continuation of Syrian regime also depends on Russian and Iranian support. We will need to mention this. And also Caesar Act primarily target the reconstruction of process of Syria. As an economist, when I do check this map and see Libya over there, see Iraq over there, see Syria over there, I do see opportunities to reconstruction. For example, in construction sector in Turkey is really developed and it's kind of a triggering factor of the economic development in Turkey. So once I do check the map and I do see the current political situation, it's just, I just think that I need to be part of this reconstruction process. It's the case for Turkey, it's the case for many other countries, like even Israel and even Greece and even other countries in Europe. This is what France is doing right now, actually, in Lebanon, for example. Macron, little guy, trying to act like owner of those region again as their historical acts, as their historical kind of obligation, their historical manners. But the world has changed, and they will learn this. And we actually gave them lesson in Libya anyway. They learned their lesson in Libya and even Azerbaijan. So Russia and Iran here was the main targets of the Caesar Act, by the way. And the Caesar Act also caused hyperinflation, one of the main causes of hyperinflation in Syrian economy. And also civil uprising, even in the places that under the regime control, people just start to went to cities, and they kind of rebelled against the regime. Actually, they increased their voice against the regime and said that they are actually starving. And the exchange rate devaluations also was important factors on the economic crisis. Let's come to the Lebanese crisis, Lebanese economic crisis. I will explain the economic crisis, and then I will explain how it affects the Syrian economic crisis and how it's related to Syria in the first place. According to IMF, the debt stock of Lebanon actually was 191% of GDP. So the Lebanon was the third most indebted country in the world. So import-dependent economic structure of Lebanon actually was one of the main reasons of weakness in the economy itself. The economic composition of Lebanon consists of actually the banking sector, services sector, remittances comes from the foreign currency comes from abroad, from those who live abroad actually. From those Lebanese who live abroad, like US, like Europe. So, and tourism sector, the services sector is the leading sectors of the economy. The political instability in the country, the ethnic and sectarian governance structure was another reason of such crisis. So they faced the worst period since 1975 to 1990, civil war, under the impact of the financial crisis during this last 10 or 2 decades, especially last 10 decades, last 1 and 2 decades, which decades means 10 years anyway. Just FYI, just the notes. So the depreciation of the domestic currency was reached up 70% in the process, and $1 has reached the level of 5,000 Lebanese pounds, and it increased a lot. And also it went into black market again, as it was in Syria and it was in Iran as well. Also civil uprisings after the economic crisis were another reason of economic crisis, and also it's also outcome of the economic crisis. The role of youngsters again, what did I say to you in the first place? Keep in mind the young unemployment rate in any country in the region. It was the case for Turkey as well. It is the case for Iran, it's the case for Iraq, it's the case for Lebanon, it's the case for Syria. And all the common factor of these countries actually young unemployment rate, since they have tremendous and really good, really high young population rate, which is kind of in the first place in economic manner, is kind of an advantage for a country, because the human capital is one of the strongest part of production process in theory. But as you have this much high rate of young population, if you cannot direct this young population into production sector, if you cannot direct them into production, if you cannot employ them, it starts to cause problems to you. And these countries, under their political instabilities and unfair rules and autocratic regimes, the high young population rate actually become kind of a problem for them. And so youngsters actually take the front of civil uprisings. So they start to create problems for those regions, for those regimes. So the situation end up with the resignation of Hariri administration, and Diab administration come to the front. But Diab government actually Diab administration kind of imposed and declared austerity packages, but these packages failed. I will also explain why. And the impact of COVID-19 also come to the end. And at the end, the Diab government actually declared the state of default, which means actually they declared that they can no longer be able to pay their debt, their foreign debt, and they directly start negotiations with IMF, which is kind of the same thing that declaring that just signing your debt. There's no difference actually. So, but they had even couldn't get deal with IMF because IMF would knock your door if you have something to kind of take from your side. But IMF seen that nothing left to take over from this economy, so they even now kind of not willingly to not keen to deal with the Lebanon administrations. So the measures of the administration, what was the austerity plans? We called this austerity packages here, but why they failed actually? The austerity packages was a bit problematic. How? Because, for example, February 22, 2020, I quote, currency restrictions started to follow by the government. They kind of started to intervene into the market, directly intervene into market, but you are not China. So if you intervene directly into market as a weak governance, as a weak economy, so it caused many other problems actually. It caused today's problems actually. So what kind of restrictions was that? Only $400 per month can be withdrawn from banks, and capital control law submitted to parliament, but hopefully it did not pass. Also, permission was given to withdraw also lately, just $100 per week in March as the domestic currency continued to lose its value actually. So it means that direct intervention of the markets. As we mentioned, remember, the banking sector, financial sector is one of the leading composition of factors of economic composition of the country. So once you just broke this system, everything just broken in line after this intervention. So also it affected the central bank's reserves of Lebanon. For example, in 2017, there was $55.4 billion, and it decreased to $52 billion in the next year. And the other year, in 2019, it just decreased to $50 billion. So 1/5 of the population earns less than the minimum wage in the Lebanon economy. So the well-being of the population, the society also just broke down. As of 2020, the minimum wage actually just was around, let's keep it in dollars, $446 per month. In March, it decreased to $275. And in June, it decreased to $135. Can you imagine the loss of people actually? And also, depreciation of the country's currency affected on the prices. Also, it increased, especially imported products, more than 100%. And also, it increased the domestic product, the prices of domestic products by 50%, which means actually hyperinflation, the case of hyperinflations. And also, unemployment rate increased to 35% in the country. Lebanese bank actually restored the hash rate against capital outflows. Also, those are another restriction policies. They suspended international transfers. This is important. Keep in mind again, I will remind you. And introduced restriction on clients withdrawals from their accounts. Even they restricted, as a client, they restricted your right to withdraw your own money from your account. They kind of restricted this. Can you imagine how they broke the financial system? So as a result of these restrictions, the dollar fell to the black market, of course, and $1 actually just start up to almost 80,000 Lebanese pound. But this means also the volatility increase, the increasing volatility, the ongoing volatility actually just is one of the main reasons of destruction of the market actually. We also faced this in Turkey. The Beirut port explosion also come to the case. It was another and last devastation of Lebanon economy. The Beirut port was one of the main. It was only actually port to. It's kind of an open gate to. It's kind of a gate to open a global market for Lebanon and also as well as Syria. Actually, I explain now. The food crisis may occur because the Beirut port was a country granary. The second biggest port was Trablus, and it has not the granary at all. So the lack of alternative ports, the other ports, they have many ports, but those ports are not enough to take place of or replace a Beirut port. So also this explosion showed the weaknesses of the administration of the country. Also, the administration just resigned, but surprisingly, who came to the fort? Hariri again became the government. They took the government. It was strange. So I put one study by ORSAM here. Actually, it's Turkish, but try to use it. So now the answer, we are almost run out of time. I will explain them briefly. We were discussing what's the relationship between Syrian economy and Lebanon economy. Since the two countries actually close to each other, if you check the map, with the start of Syrian civil war, actually with the emergence of Syrian civil war, the Syria started, or the Assad regime started to use Lebanese financial system to open the market, global market. As we remember, one of the strongest parts of the Lebanon economy is its financial system, which they broke later or current years. And Syria kind of used Lebanon's financial system to protect its kind of reserves. And also they use Lebanon banking system to protect themselves from the sanctions of EU, across the restrictions of EU and the US. So those are the reasons why Lebanon crisis directly affected Syria. So also dollar restrictions by Lebanese banks put Assad regime into trouble. Why? Since the civil war occurred, the emergence of civil war, almost 80% of merchants and oligarchs in Syria and rich people, wealthy people in Syria, sent their deposits to deposit their money, deposit their amounts to Lebanon banks. And once they went into crisis in Lebanon and banks started to impose restrictions on use of dollars, and the Syrian oligarchs actually affected directly. That's how they are bound with each other. I'm just taking a brief information to you because of time restriction. So, for example, according to economists, in 2011, it was transferred from Syria to Lebanon more than $20 billion of wealth, of deposits. According to Financial Times, 80% of wealthy Syrians reported they kept their money in Lebanon. So can you imagine now how the Lebanon crisis, economic crisis, affected Syrian crisis? So Lebanon's dollar restrictions causes dollar shortages, like food prices soared in Syria. It's increased up to almost 170%. And one advantage for Turkish part, Turkey, in Idlib, where it is under the control of the opposition, civil opposition in Syria, they start to use Turkish lira against Syrian pound. So I will show you just last two graphs here for this topic. This is the Syrian currencies position, and this is Lebanon's domestic currencies position. Can you see the difference? There is no difference. It's almost similar actually, because they affected each other in the same directions. In those parts, actually, they show this cycles. Actually, the business cycle shows us. For example, this down cycle shows us the new Diab administrations and the new administration in the Lebanon, and it directly answer the situation, but it's small. The effect was small, and also the dollar restrictions actually was the main cause of this kind of increase, especially here. The dollar and also international transfer restrictions, one of the other causes of these business cycles. But here again, same restrictions cause same business cycles in Syria. They are directly related to each other. Actually, we can even easily say this, looking this information. So the last topic, the economic foundation of normalization with Israel. This normalization process, actually, I will just briefly explain the situation. The normalization process started with Egypt in historical manner, started with Egypt, Jordan, Emirates, United Arab Emirates. I will call them Emirates anymore after this point to be shorted it, and Bahrain. Especially the Israeli and Emirati relations come to the fore because of the importance of these two countries and because of the main agreements, main deals just made between two countries. They kind of start to negotiate each other, and they kind of developed meetings and visits for both sides. Actually, their kind of agreements just increased a lot. They made many deals actually between two countries. For example, Energy Ministry of Israel and Emirati evaluate opportunities for cooperation and investments between together, including natural gas exports to Europe in October, for example. They agreed on connecting electrical networks, natural gas export to Europe through pipelines, which is an important point, I will explain. And also another important issue, the Energy Minister of Israel proposal was just hosting or inviting the Emirates to participate in the Eastern Mediterranean Gas Forum, which is directly related with Turkey and Egypt as well. Because of this natural gas export to Europe through pipelines issue is directly related with Egypt, because this situation, actually, this act will directly affect Egypt's influence in the region. Using Suez Canal, actually, was another problematic issue for Egypt. And so Egypt's reaction was really kind of admired, but they did not react much because of Sisi regime, actually. They even did not react Greek Cyprus unfair agreements between them, because they lost many, almost 25,000 kilometers square of area. They lost this much area by signing deal with Greek Cyprus, actually, because it was against their national interest. Anyway, so also agreements just developed on mainly financial strength of the Emirates and technological strength of Israel. Emirates was planning to technology transfer from Israel, and Israel's intention is mostly taking advantage of the financial strength of the Emirati, taking more investment from Emirati sides. So they kind of made agreements between, for example, the Israeli Chamber of Commerce with the free trade zone of Abu Dhabi Airport and the Jebel Ali free trade zone. So with these agreements, actually, they kind of agreed to trade with no tariffs, under no tariffs, and under no other taxes between two countries' transactions and two countries' investments. So most of the memorandum of understanding on cooperation was signed on finance and banking sectors also. And also the negotiations commenced between Abu Dhabi Investment Office and Israel Investment Office in terms of the investment opportunities. And in the statement, they actually agreed on the finding mutual benefits, the investigative mutual benefits, and they stated that their focus will be on technology in particular, so which is good for the Emiratis somehow. And also Israel's Popaylim Bank and the Emirates' three largest banks made agreements on the stock markets of two countries, and also including common financial technologies and a wide range of other investment opportunities. For the Emirate part, actually, they kind of mostly, I will just briefly explain them and finish the course here. They mostly kind of target especially technology transfer, especially on the agricultural sector. For example, it was here actually, yeah, on food security, and other technology transfers from here, yeah, from the Israeli part. For example, they made agreements on and they signed memorandum of understanding with Israel on four main parts actually. Opening of Netafim's regional office center, agreement with Gapa Varieties Company, which is the part of the Israel ministry, agriculture ministry, to promote cooperation of new types of fresh products with copyrights of it, and the agreement of Volcanic Center, which is also supported by Israeli, which is also a company of Israeli agricultural ministry of agriculture. This company conducts agricultural research under the auspice of this ministry to facilitate its work on the effects of salinity on agricultural products in the region. So, which means actually they were working on agricultural technologies, which is kind of necessary for the Emiratis actually. And also another agreement was on Al Dahra Agricultural Company of Emirat and Water Gene Company of Israel, which develops advanced technologies in the field of air water. They kind of produce water from air and use them in the agricultural sector. And on those perspectives, actually, it seems that Emirati, despite their kind of this mistrust of their heritage by signing agreements and by signing, for example, free visa agreements with Israel, which was the first Arab country actually. The Emirat became the first Arab country to allow to give free visa to Israel actually, to make free visa agreement with Israel. But apart from these facts, the agreements between Israel and Emirati became really profitable for both countries actually. And also it's smart, I have to confess this. It's kind of, I have to accept this actually. It's kind of profitable for them, especially profitable and smart, because they kind of take technology transfers, especially on agricultural sector, needy sector of the Emirati. It's kind of good, it will be kind of good for their economy, we should say this. So I would like to stop here. I can say I will share these notes with you. If you have any questions, you can ask through the system, question and answer system. Otherwise, I will just finish the course here. And I hope tamam. I hope you benefit. Şeyleri okuyorum, yazılanları. I just started to read through the comments. Actually, sorry, a bit late, but I was planning to actually finish it half an hour later. But anyway, just keep it short. I hope you benefit from this course, and we will be more welcome to see you in next future ORSAM programs actually, such as this kind of courses. Also, we will have panels, specific panels, and other kind of events to feed your necessities actually, to help to increase your skills on Middle Eastern studies actually. Hope to see you again. You are all welcome to join ORSAM's event. If you have any questions, please do not hesitate to send me emails through send me questions through emails, or even you can type to me. Hope to see you again, and be safe during this pandemic time. Take care.